here it is, July 27th, 2019, and I'm on southbound I-270, or maybe it's 170, just west of St. Louis, and I'm getting off on Doherty Ferry Road.
On right to Doherty Ferry Road, then keep right.
En route to the National Museum of Transportation, which seems like kind of a grandiose title for what used to just be called the St. Louis Transportation Museum.
Keep right on Doherty Ferry Road.
Back in the, when would it have been?
Keep right on Doherty Ferry Road.
Yeah, back in the late 60s, when my family lived in this general neck of the woods, we used to come here quite a lot, and it was kind of a rough and ready museum in those days, but I noticed that it now has this rather grand title of National Museum of Transportation.
Continue 0.8 miles, then turn left on Barrett Station Road.
So I thought I would swing by since I was in the area and see how the place has changed. Back in the 60s, this was kind of out in the boonies, but now it's...
Turn left on Barrett Station Road.
The general sprawl of the St. Louis area seems to have come a lot closer to it.
Continue 0.3 miles to address 2933, on right. In 0.2 miles, arrive at address 2933, on right. Arriving at address 2933, on right.
Here it is. So when I was here the last time, all this nice landscaping and such wasn't here. There are a lot more buildings. It was pretty much just a kind of a rough rail yard with a bunch of old rail cars and engines, mostly badly in need of restoration, paint, what have you. And I seem to recall they had about one building, and there was a DC-3 or something parked outside right by the entrance. But I don't think it's the same entrance we came through here. I think this is a newer area adjacent to what was here before.
Okay, thank you.
I like the steam shovel. Oh goodness, are you hungry? Are you hungry?
It's going all the way.
Yeah, she did that hot dog.
So it's going to go up there and come down. Right? There it is right now. And there goes across the bridge. Now there goes it. I did it. Ooh, nice.
Looks like somebody has died, doesn't it? There's all poor camel.
It's a 1954 International pickup. It's a 1919 Ford model TT. It's a 1925 auto car model 27K lumber truck.
Back then?
So the rule of 72, you know, that's about 3 for
They have a little handcar railway out here for the kids. The last handcar is left for the day, and it's only about an hour after opening, so I'm not sure what that means. Anyway, it's just this tiny little thing here, and you can pump a little hand car around. I presume they keep them in those little buildings there. I have a friend who owns one of these, and he takes it around and sets it up in different places. They're designed to be easily transportable. I think he just has the rail sections. You can see how they're just coupled together every few feet, so you can take them apart almost like you know, track sections of a model electric train or something. I don't think he even uses ties. Things he just sets them on the grass and hooks them together. And there's also the miniature train, which I saw in the parking lot. And it makes a circuit of part of the grounds. I'll stop here and wait for it to come around. And the main rail yard is up higher, so they have this little switchback walkway coming from the main museum building back there. This is a whole lot nicer than what it used to be. Wonder where they get their funding from. They have a library building there. I presume you have to have an appointment to use it. So here's the Earl C. Lindbergh Automobile Center. It's a small car museum. And over here is this building they call the Barrett Station. Looks like an old railway station that's been relocated here. Now this area here is the old grounds that I remember, although I'm pretty sure it was just gravel in those days. But it's about the same size parking lot going from down there. The old entrance used to be down in that area somewhere. And then you came along here, and I think this Barrett Station maybe was the building that was here as practically the sole, you know, visitor center and everything. And it does say visitor center there, but it's the one they referred to at the new visitor center as the old visitor center, or the second one. And then the rail yard, the part that I remember, is all over here. I think we have to go through here to get in. Yeah, the fellow inside the older visitor center here confirmed that this was the original visitor center building, and the old entrance is where I thought it was. DC3 is still down there, he said. I'll probably go over. And that everything else back in that direction is only, he said, 5 or 6 years ago, he thinks. So they have a helpful sign here instructing how to identify locomotives, steam locomotives in particular, with the first number referring to the number of pilot wheels in front of the lead wheels, or they are the lead wheels, pilot or lead wheels, and then after that's the number, like a 4 in this top example, being the number of drive wheels, and then the third number is the number of trailing wheels, which support the firebox and cab. And then if there's a T, that means it's a tank engine, which it doesn't need a separate tender, and an F indicates a fireless locomotive. So they have a list of wheel arrangements at this museum. It's pretty vague in my memory, but they may not have had these paved walkways here either. I seem to remember just walking around on gravel. Maybe they had it, or maybe it was dirt. One thing they did have an issue with in those days was that the majority of cars and locomotives were in very rough-looking condition. And I can already see that at least some of them have had an amount of at least cosmetic restoration.
They actually built 32 of them,
And 16 was rejected.
Half of them.
But you can
But
say
they were,
that you
you're
can
saying
see on
they were
this one.
built.
Of course, one thing they used to allow people to do back in those days was climb on practically everything. And I suspect they're a lot more restricted now. I don't see a lot of ladders allowing access.
This part, that wheel, where it's attached, where the tires attached to the wheel, is they put down it red hot, beat it onto the tire, onto the wheel. Or you can change the tire.
Break the seal from it.
Just put it-
Are they different types of metal then?
both
Both steel. And then I
So this is this beautiful streamliner here, the Silver Charger on the Burlington line. The Silver Charger for the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy from 1939, number 9908, built by the Budd Company with the engine a 1,000 horsepower 567 diesel built by General Motors Electromotive Division.
soldering back then.
It was the last of the early Zephyr trains in which the car body housed the engine and doubled as a mail baggage car. This unit originally powered the General Pershing Zephyr on fast runs from St. Louis to Kansas City and was the last shovel-nosed engine in service.
Oh yeah, I see it coming behind that wheel.
That track was wet, I had the rock on it, it had ice on it, and to move it would be very difficult for that engine to start. Still, so it's total failure.
You have to see it right here.
It's a 6,500 gallon petroleum car. This is part of the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy line from 1922. It was a mail car. And this is a 1960 American Car and Foundry 2-compartment 70-ton steel-covered hopper, used for things like cement, grain, dry chemicals, plastic pellets, and whatnot. This is a 1916, also from the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy. It's a baggage car.
Judah, look, more over here.
And this is a 1948 Union Refrigerator Transit Lines. So, a refrigerator car.
Look, you can go see this one. Let's go see this one.
Oh, say excuse me.
Here, hold on.
Let's go.
Jesse's scared. It's okay.
Evan, come here.
Oh, sorry.
Let's go. There's more trains.
So is this like a lodging train?
Let me see it.
No.
This is for the workers. They would sleep there when they had shift changes. Abbott, are you on a train? On an old train? You are?
We can get down here.
Let's go back through, Abbott. Yeah. Stop.
Well, that caboose is in better condition than a lot of other ones I've seen in other museums. Anyway, this is a 1980, it says, Missouri Pacific car. That's fairly recently. It says these were built by the Missouri Pacific Railroad between 1977 and 1981 as the last such cars purchased by the Missouri Pacific. So it's a steel car, not made out of wood. But this other caboose we went through is also steel, but it has a lot more wood in its construction. And this one's dating from 1954. That was the Northern Pacific one we went through, and there's the tank car that we went through, which they had cut open, and that dates from 1940. So picking up where we left off on this side, it's a 1917, also Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy. This is a standard coach car used for mainline and branch service. Riveted steel, driven with axle-driven electric generators and mechanical air conditioning. And then they've got this garishly painted locomotive at the end. It's got to be just for the kids.
Oh, so they color identify. Good idea.
Oh, I see what they've done here. The parts are color coded, indicating different parts.
You ready to go down?
It's a 1954 Spokane, Portland, and Seattle railway. It is a caboose, and one can go up in it if they want. Okay, so this is a 1952 U.S. Army Transportation Corps experimental gas turbine locomotive, which has two Boeing 5022E 150 horsepower jet engine type gas turbines. And it was tested by the Army at Fort Eustis, Virginia. This is City of St. Louis Water Division from 1924, a Whitcomb Locomotive Company of Rochelle, Illinois. It's an industrial switching locomotive. Over here is a General American Fodler Corporation milk car. This is a bipolar locomotive here. Doesn't have a front end. This is a 1920 Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul and Pacific, built by General Electric to pull transcontinental passenger trains through the Cascade Mountains. Now the bipolar here, or gearless bipolar, doesn't really mean that it's got no front end. It replies more to the type of drive, which is a 12 traction motor drive mounted directly on the driving axles, eliminating use of gears. Moving downhill, the motors converted into generators which returned electricity to the distributing system. This is the sole surviving bipolar. It was donated to this museum in 1961. And this, on this side, was a 1984 front-runner piggyback car designed to carry truck trailers. It's unusual in that it only has 4 wheels instead of the usual pair of 2-axle trucks. And it's has a rigid trailer hitch, as well as no continuous floor or deck, meaning it could not be used for containers. This is a 1960 St. Louis San Francisco Railway, or Frisco Railway. It's a tri-level rack built to carry automobiles. Over here is a 1918 Illinois terminal built by IT Railroad and its Decatur, Illinois shops.
Yeah, it is. I don't recall ever seeing the truck transport like that.
It's actually a Class B electric freight B&B locomotive equipped with 4 GE 69C motors. It looks more like a passenger car, but it's really a locomotive. Over here is a 1906. I can't get far enough away to get a good view. Built by Alco GE for use on electrified track between Grand Central Station in New York City and Harmon, New York. This is a 1936 locomotive built by the Plymouth Locomotive Works of Plymouth, Ohio. It's a propane electric unit used in short line freight service on the Joplin-Pittsburgh Railway and later on the Kansas City Public Service freight operation. This looks like a much more modern car. Over here is a 1935 Baltimore and Ohio built by GE in Erie, Pennsylvania. 1800 horsepower locomotive. It's the first non-articulated high-speed mainline passenger locomotive on the American railroads. Originally used on the Baltimore and Ohio's Royal Blue passenger train. This thing here, even though it's very modern looking, it's a 1965 built by General American Transportation, or yeah, General American Transportation Corporation. It says it is the world's largest tank car, used for experimental purposes, transporting anhydrous ammonia and LP gas. This is a 1918 St. Louis San Francisco Eagle. Built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works for Imperial Russia, which contracted with Baldwin in 1915 for some 1,200 locomotives. Following the Russian Revolution, and therefore the inability to deliver these locomotives, 20 were purchased by the Frisco Railroad. Changes were made to meet the American standards, including widening the wheel tread to accommodate the 3.5-inch gauge difference between America and Russia. Over here on this side, we have this 1937 model NC diesel electric switcher, operated by the Sabine River and Northern Railroad, SR&N. So we've already come down that way. And let's go down this way first. And this is the upper yard. I believe this is the museum's big boy locomotive down there. It used to be just packed in amongst other locomotives, so at some point they moved it to a more prominent location. This doesn't have any signage on it that I can see. Maybe it's on the other side. It's either a schoolhouse car or a railway library or something. The train of thought. Yes, so this is the Union Pacific Big Boy number 4006, and they do keep the cab open for display. This was built in 1941 by the American Locomotive Company. It's one of 25 big boys built. The largest successful steam locomotives ever built, with a total weight over 600 tons. It's an articulated locomotive in a 4884 wheel configuration with the 2 drive wheel sets. 4 wheels there and 4 wheels there, plus their mirror image on the other side, articulated so they could go around curved track. Now, even though this has been painted, it's still very rough underneath. But it's still nice to have it here. In a couple of more days, I'm hoping to catch the recently restored big boy, the only one that's actually operating. I hope to catch it passing out of Illinois. If the timing works out right, we'll see about that. So, this is the coal tender for the big boy. It's supposed to hold 28 tons of soft or bituminous coal. Extensions of the top increased its capacity to 33 tons. The water tank is located behind and below, which holds 2,500 or 25,000 gallons of water. And there's a screw feeder down there that brings it right in. Doesn't look like they needed to do a lot of hand shoveling of coal here. Still has a fire door. Well, there's zero light in there, so can't see much. So let's see. Pair of engineer stations. I suppose that's the fireman there, and this is the engineer. Lots of room in the cabin. Road foreman seat. This was the supervisor of the engineers who might ride the train at any time. This is the engineer's seat. He operated the locomotive and supervised the firemen. And it's the fireman's seat. He just made sure the fire was operating correctly, and behind it's the brakeman's seat. The brakeman rode in the locomotive, and there was another one in the caboose along with the conductor. The brakeman watched the cars looking for problems and helped add or remove cars along the route. Pressure steam gauges, injector controls. It dealt with supply of the primary water to the boiler. Stoker controls used to control the small steam engine located at the front end of the tender under the coal bunker that ran the stoker screw feeding coal to the firebox. Then steam jets distributed the coal. The firemen adjusted the jets to keep the bed of coals even from the front to the rear and side to side, so that's what those knobs are for. Ash pan water sprinklers, the 4 valves down here, and another one below the firebox, were helped to use to wash the ashes out of the ash pan once the locomotive was at the roundhouse. The firebox doors are usually kept closed. Excuse me. These 3 valves here are water cocks used. They're connected to different heights in the water column and were backup for the water gauges. They could be opened to see if water or steam was present as a check of the water level. And these, well, this big lever here is the throttle. Controlled the speed of the locomotive. And these are the water column gauges. Roof ventilator. Automatic brake valve, independent brake valve.
Wow. How do you even control this?
Wow.
This thing, does this thing even go up?
Hey, so this is the throttle. It's meant to go.
Okay. So down here is a snow plow, which would be, I think, typically put right in front of a locomotive. This is from the St. Louis Southwestern Maintenance Right-of-Way Wedge Snowplow. Made from a steam locomotive's whale-back tender by removing the fuel tank and placing the plow on the water tank, which was filled with rock to weigh it down. The plow would be coupled to 1 or 2 locomotives, which would push it through the snow. Donated to the museum in 1995. And this is a fairly modern looking diesel electric locomotive, like one might see on any railroad nowadays. Union Pacific Centennial number 6944. These were built between 1969 and 1971 by the Electromotive Division of General Motors Corporation. They were called Centennial in honor of the anniversary of the completion of the first transcontinental railroad in 1869. This particular loco was built in 1971. It is representative of the largest diesel electric locomotives ever built.
What's that thing doing
This is a Union Pacific from 1966. It's a rotary snowplow. It's the heaviest ever built, weighing 367,400 pounds. Its cutting wheel could throw snow far to either side of the track as it operated at 4 to 6 miles per hour.
So I'm 6'3". Yeah. That's a good 12 foot. You gotta get the picture. That thing is big. Yeah.
This up here is the Roberts Pavilion. It's just a roof-only shed to keep the weather off some more trains. So let's go down that way. This is Chesapeake in Ohio, from 1944. It's a 284 Kanawha or Berkshire type freight locomotive built by Alco. This number 2727 weighs 85,000 pounds. Definitely a good sized locomotive. This is a 1927 464 Hudson locomotive. Originally used with heavy passenger service until 1947, when the Nickel Plate Railroad converted over to diesel locomotives. And the Nickel Plate Railroad is the shorthand for the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad, 1927. So we're way out here at the eastern extreme of the museum, right by the local highway. This is a 1943 Southern Pacific locomotive number 4460, built by the Lima Locomotive Works. It's a 484 General Service GS6 type that was used for both freight and passenger service. Now this is kind of a do not access area, so I'm not supposed to go beyond that. And it looks like the rest of this pavilion, if you want to walk around, and you have to be up at more of a passenger level. Number 50, number 5011 on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, built in 1944 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works. One of the largest non-articulated locomotives ever built. Again, typical of the locomotives here, they haven't really been restored. There's some little rough spot welds holding things together, but at least they've been painting them, which is more than I could say the last time I was here decades ago.
Can't move anything.
is number 4502, a Missouri Pacific from 1955, built by American Locomotive Company, or ALCO. It's diesel electric. Daniel Nason, Boston Providence from 1863. This is a General Motors electromotive division of GM. A 4-unit demonstrator locomotive that proved the efficiency of diesel power compared to steam, dating from 1939.
Seeing subway trains?
We can go to Pullman. Up here. You guys taking some videos. Come on.
This is 2804, Union Pacific 1966, built by General Electric. It's a freight locomotive, diesel electric, with the outer shroud removed. Got your equipment blower up here. The traction generator. This is the one that provides electric current at 600 volts DC, which is used in the traction motors located on the wheel trucks. And this is your big diesel engine here. A lot of side panels removed. I think that's the first time I've seen a locomotive undressed like this. This is a 1940 Missouri Pacific parlor observation car.
Well, we have R107.
I thought we could go in here, but I don't see an entrance. Kind of the equivalent of the current Amtrak observation or lounge cars.
So how did you get from one car to another?
It's already connected, and it's got these.
Excuse me, ladies.
Going
Thank
this
you.
way?
Oh, I think he wants us to wait.
That one private car we have is sitting. It kind of looks like this here.
Trample these things, right?
But over here it's got this.
You're all good.
It's almost looks like this. It's got
Unbelievable. Hey, you can't find that line. Hey, Nora, come here. You guys want to sit in? Come sit in.
Transport executives and guests. You can buy chicken on this car. It's strictly
And there's an upper berth up there that folds down.
In this one, you can see the
Oh,
whatever
please don't
trundle.
let the kids sit on the furniture.
Here, I'll step in here so you guys can get through.
So there's another shower in here,
Right there.
but it's
and I'll
pretty
press the
dark.
spots.
So somebody's got a bedroom in there, and then this compartment with the facing seats.
Are they like pocket doors or is it a door? Okay, no, it's just. Oh, come here, Mom. Let's take a picture. The bed goes down.
This is a Pullman car, so it's pretty deluxe. Crew quarters, along with the crew toilet and shower, combined shower and toilet. So not that much different from the built-in bathrooms in first-class cars on Amtrak, if you're not in the roomette, and of course the galley. So a handful of people could travel pretty nicely in one of these Pullman cars. Men's smoking lounge. This is where male passengers came to smoke, as well as it was their toilet area. Many tales were told on these coaches over the years, and some may have even been true. The women's lounge is at the opposite end of the car. The porter's job. Porter greeted passengers, helped them to their space on the car, and saw that they got off at their station en route. He converted the seats to beds and back again, kept the car tidy, shined the passengers' shoes, and provided other services as requested. So pretty much the same as a modern Amtrak first-class car attendant. And there is a fold-down bed. And this is the porter's own berth. This is called a section. It has a lower and upper berth at night and 4 seats during the day. This car has 12 sections and 1 drawing room. It's the most common type. In 1930, Pullman had 9,800 cars, about half of them like this one, offering over 100,000 beds every night to rail passengers. It's a little raggedy, but still, one can see what it would have been like. This is the drawing room, the only space on the car with a door and its own toilet behind the entry door. So back in here, groups of 3 to 5 adults at a time. And this is the women's lounge and bathroom. Didn't really seem to have a lot of seating space for just sitting and chatting, but a couple of sinks and a toilet, and there's probably a shower in there. The dental lavatory is the little sink.
car seat.
Obviously more of a coach car. Men's and women's toilets, one at each end. They look like they're pretty comparable.
Would you like to go up in this train at Henry's Pullman?
In this area we can't walk down between them. This is number 952, a Delaware, Lackawanna and Western from 1905, also built by Alco in Schenectady, New York. This is one that I remember from the past, an Illinois Terminal Rail Bus from 1939, built by the White Motor Company as a school bus. It was adapted for rail by the IT Railroad, which equipped it with special rear axle flanged wheels and a four-wheel front bogie truck. Used to transport passengers between Grafton and Alton, Illinois. These other cars here are closed to passengers walking through, so there's not much access here except to see the heads of these trains. This is number 1522, a 1926 Baldwin Locomotive Works, mountain type 482 fast freight and passenger locomotive from 1926. This is number 318, Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis from 1926. Don't see a sign for this one, but it's apparently a diesel electric. Okay, so from the shed here, the pavilion we were just in, heading out to this other smaller shed. Which is the so-called Abbott building.
Yeah, he didn't drive the trains though. He sold the tickets so people could ride.
There's a lot more stock back here, but it's in worse condition. Walk up here, get a little closer to this sign. This is a American Steel Foundries from 1948, a Whitcomb locomotive, Company of Rochelle, Illinois, 65-ton industrial switcher. So this locomotive is, what is it? It's a 1899 number 573, built by the Rhode Island Locomotive Works. It's a 260 from, I think I already said it, 1899. And one can cross the tracks here, even though it's not a marked one does have to watch it because the trolley uses these tracks, and potentially other cars could be rolled around at any time. The amount of rust on the rails indicates when they were probably last used, but they can always move things around here. From 1929, number 2933, New York Central, a 482 Mohawk type locomotive built by Alco for fast freight service. It later performed passenger and freight duties. Now down here, behind these gates, is a connection to the main line, which goes right by here. Museum property stops at the gate. So the main line comes through here. I don't know which railroad it's on. And obviously this is how they can get locomotives and other rolling stock in and out of here as things are acquired, traded, or whatever. Now this shed here is called the Abbott building. It's a lot smaller than the other one we just visited. And a lot of this stuff is more like the condition I remember from nearly 50 years ago. Seems like we always came here on a rainy day, which didn't help. This is from 1928. It's a Illinois terminal locomotive, articulated for dealing with very sharp curves. It's actually an interurban freight locomotive. Yeah, this is a lot more like what I recall, just a lot of stock jammed in really close together, just rough gravel between the tracks, everything kind of rough and decrepit. So this is more of the old days here. It's really spectacular how much they fixed up, as much as they have, to the higher level of presentability. (1942), built by the Pennsylvania Railroad as 4918 for use in the Northeast Corridor from New York to Washington, D.C. This GGI class electric locomotive was one of 139 which were built from 1934 to 1943. This became an Amtrak unit in 1971, was renumbered as 4916. Pretty sure that's the oldest thing I've seen with an Amtrak name on it. This is a P5 prototype built in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's a locomotive, but it doesn't really look it from the ground. And then back here you run into the hill. And over here is a very historic tunnel, the West Barrett's Tunnel. Something which I remember peering into fondly as a junior high school kid. This used to be how the rails would get to this location before the main line bored through a cutout in the hill. There was just this tunnel here going through, and let's see what it says. West Barrett's Tunnel, 1851 to 53 and 1929. The first railroad tunnels west of the Mississippi River are located at Barrett's, Missouri, which is the name for the station where we are located. They were built between 1951 and 1953 by the Pacific Railroad of Missouri, renamed Missouri Pacific in 1876. They carried a single broad gauge track with 5 foot 6 inches between the rails. They were designed by the line's chief engineer, James P. Kirkwood, for whom the nearby town of Kirkwood, Missouri is named. The tracks were changed to standard gauge, which is 4 foot 8.5 inches, in 1869. This tunnel was originally 450 feet long, but was shortened to its current 410 feet in 1929. The single-track tunnels were an operating bottleneck in what became a double-track railroad and became intolerable during World War II. In 1944, the tunnels were bypassed by 2 mainline tracks placed in a cut 100 feet to the south. The land with tunnels was then surplus to the line's needs, and the museum leased the property for $1 a year until it was later donated to the museum. The tunnels were placed in the National Register of Historic Places in 1978. So this was a very important rail passage at one point before World War II, if you were going west of the Mississippi River. That always looked very dank and forbidding to me as a child. This is number 311, Missouri, Kansas, Texas, or Katy, made by the Baldwin Locomotive Works. It's a 440 locomotive from 1890, and something was done to it in 1923. Okay, I've walked past, I think, all the locomotives. I'm gonna go down and see my old friend, the DC-3, and then pop into the car museum.
Let me push him in here. What? That way you can run for me.
This is a 1960, is it Didia? Didia? I don't know.
It looks like you got a little bit.
This is a 1901 from the St. Louis Motor Carriage Company. An A.L. Dyke steam car from the late 1919 Doris panel truck. Another museum exhibition of a high-wheel bike with the wrong seat on it. So let's see, what was I up to? This is a 1923 traffic truck and a 1923 Moon sports touring car and another 1924 Moon, a Roadster, and a 1917 Doris Opera Coupe. And this is a circa 1890 Moon Brothers carriage car. This is a 1957 Metropolitan by the Nash Motor Company. 1980 Commuta car. And an 1890 or 1980 Bradley GTE2. A 1910 Hupmobile Model 20 runabout. A 1930 Ford Model AA dump truck. And this is unmarked. This is an 1890 hearse, horse-drawn.
Okay, now smile, okay?
1905 Looting House wagon. 1920s Peevely milk wagon. A 1923 Stanley Steamer touring car. 1912 Pierce Arrow motorcycle. 1906 Ford Model N. 1951 Chrysler New Yorker. 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air. 1951 Studebaker Commander Starlight Coupe. 1941 Cadillac Fleetwood Series 60 Special Edition. 1964 Ford Mustang. 1915 Ford Model T. 1917 Chevrolet Series 490 touring car. 1937 Chevrolet Master Deluxe 4-door sports sedan. 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air 4-door hardtop sports sedan. 1963 Chrysler Turbine.
Just like it.
This is a 1957 Cushman Eagle scooter. No signage on this one. This is a 1965 Chevrolet Corvette. I'm guessing they just use this parking lot for overflow now, the old parking lot I mean. The Laclede or Laclade, maybe? Christie 1907 040T four-wheel switcher built by the Davenport Locomotive Works. Coal-burning, narrow-gauge, saddle tank locomotive. It carried its own water and fuel on the engine, so it did not need a tender. And that's more apparent here. It's actually quite a small boiler area here, and then this inverted U shape is the tankage for water and fuel, presumably. This is the Towboat HT pot. I wonder how many people come down here since it's not on the main entrance anymore. The first Missouri River towboat with a welded steel hull instead of a riveted hull. Built in 1933, operated out of Kansas City, Missouri. Named for Herman T. Pott, a distinguished river transportation executive and entrepreneur. This would move groups of barges up and down the river. How did it get to a landlocked museum? A truck brought in the vessel's hull, after which its engine was reinstalled and a replica deckhouse built. Tripping hazards up here. I'll get a good view of the DC-3. Paint job looks pretty good, but it looks like it needs new fabric on the ailerons and other control surfaces. Decked out in its D-Day markings. I don't recall that it was always that way. So this is technically a C-47A military transport. Basically the same thing as a DC-3. This is obviously very close to the one that I flew in Janesville last summer. Or flew on, I wasn't piloting it. It's plain to see why this is a museum favorite. Twin-engine 1943 Douglas aircraft product, military version of the DC-3, believed to have been used by the United States Army Air Force in World War II invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944. Painted in camouflage with invasion stripes. This aircraft hosted many notables in its career: the late President Harry S. Truman, several Missouri congressmen, and numerous governors and other elected officials all enjoyed flights on Goonie birds, but not necessarily this one. This particular plane was used in commercial passenger service in Nevada until reacquired by the military for use by the 131st Tactical Fighter Group of the Missouri Air National Guard, which used old 635 for 22 years until it was retired in 1972. It's nice that they've got it here. It is a transportation museum, of course. Should have at least one airplane. It has one bike, at least one motorcycle, one boat. Otherwise, it's a train museum. Well, I guess I should say it has some cars too, but it's not really a big car museum. Not really sure what this is doing here, but it's a nice idea. They call it Pollinator Junction, and it's just a little floral garden, and I think there's some herbs and other things here as well. You can wander around and it's just buzzing with bees and other pollinating insects. They have one locomotive sitting over here that is another one I remember from the old days. I'm not sure why it's here all by itself, but it's next to a maintenance building. You're not supposed to traipse around over there. But, I guess that was an attempt at streamlining, but I always thought it was one of the most stupid looking locomotives I'd ever seen. Still, cool piece of history. Well, they do have another airplane here, and here it is. It's at the opposite end of the museum by an entrance I didn't know they had off of this other road, which I think is on the north, along the north periphery of the museum, just north of the main parking lot. And they have an interesting bridge here for their miniature railway. Looks like an old kind that might have been used by the military or something.